And I got to meet some of the representatives of Sierra. We always support Sierra. They have an amazing ministry downtown helping women navigate making better decisions around their pregnancies. And if you guys don't mind, can we just honor them? Would you guys mind standing up for a second and just honor them in the work that they do? Glad you guys are here this morning. We love what you guys are doing, and we're glad that you're here. We are in part 4 of our series entitled The Gospel. And if you've been around the last month or so, we've just been talking about the importance of the church being a gospel people. And we said that the gospel is so much more than a 3-page tract. It's so much more than a 30-second presentation or a 30-minute message. It is all those things, but it's so much more. And we talked about 11 realities of the gospel-filled life from the book of Colossians, chapter 3. And it was a lot of important things, but it was so nuanced to realize that the gospel is more than just a transaction. It's an invitation to an entire life that God wants to be living in his people and through his people. And we talked about, hey, don't mess it up. Remember Paul saying, hey, this is the gospel. You don't get to change it. You don't get to shift it to the day or to the culture. No, the gospel has a church, not the church has a gospel, and the mission has a church, not the other way around. And then last week we talked about God's heart as a father and how his love for mankind influences everything he is. And at the heart of what the gospel is love. And so today, I'm excited that we're going to get to catch up with all the newcomers. If you've just been checking out City Light for the past few months, hey, come grab some Chipotle. I promise you'll have a good time. You'll make some friends and some connections. You'll be glad that you came. And I love Chipotle, so that in and of itself is a sign of the blessing of the hand of God on lunchtime today. So that's just for the new people. I will recognize you if you've been around a while and you come in with mustache and glasses. I'll know, like, hey, you go to church here, I know you. But today, part 4 of the gospel, we're gonna get super practical. We're gonna answer a question that I think is very timely in the heart and life of the church in this season that we are living in. We're going to talk about how to lead someone to Christ. How to lead to someone to Christ. And I know right there, as soon as I said that, some of you were in your heart, were like, oh, we're going to talk about that. Yes, we're going to talk about that. Let's do it this way. Let's start off with a survey. How many of you know someone who is not a Christian? They are someone that Jesus would love to experience his grace in their life, and they could use some Jesus in their life. Yeah, a bunch of us. I think if we're honest, all of us do. We know some people that could use the life-changing power of Christ in their life. Check this out. Jesus said, speaking of Christians, his followers, believers, he said of you, that you are the light of the world. That is an incredible statement. And then he said that you are the salt of the earth. And we've talked about this so many times. But then he commanded that you and I, as light and salt, are to go into all the world and preach the gospel and make disciples of all the nations. We know that, right? Now, if we know that to be true, I think a question that we need to wrestle with at the outset of today's message is, why is it that we often hesitate in sharing our faith? Why is it that we tend to get nervous, or we tend to stop, or we silence ourselves? Why is it that we do that? Now, I think that there's a lot of reasons, but I want to start off just giving us 4 reasons that most of us will probably agree with, and then we're going to get into some good news about how we can practically share the gospel right there in our circles and our relationships with the giftings that God has given us. So first, why is it that we tend to hesitate in sharing the good news? The first reason, I think, is we are afraid. We tend to be afraid. I remember when I was 7 or 8 years old, my mom would take me and my sisters on door-to-door visitation. And you guys don't know anything about door-to-door visitation, but back in the 80s, churches would come together on like Thursday nights or something, and they would put the kids in the nursery, and they would all dispatch into the city in various communities, and they'd go knocking on the doors, witnessing. And my parents had taken a very small church up in Bradyville, Tennessee. If you were to Google it, it still doesn't have a traffic light. And they started a door-to-door visitation ministry. And what that meant was my mom and us kids were gonna be walking around the community, knocking on doors, sharing Jesus. So she taught us, she's like, hey, as you're going door to door, here's maybe some one-liners, not one-liners, that sounds like here's some things that you should be saying. She said, if you were to die today, do you know without a doubt where you would spend eternity? Just a talking point, right? That's maybe something that you should say when you get to the door. And then she would tell us, you need to be praying constantly. And out there in the country, it was like a quarter mile, maybe half a mile between homes. And so there's plenty of time for praying. And she would say, as you walk up to the door, I want you to be praying for the people. So I promise you, I was praying as I walked up to those doors. And I would say, dear God in heaven, I pray that there's nobody home, right? Because I was afraid to talk about the gospel. A second reason that maybe why we hesitate in sharing our faith with our friends is we just don't feel qualified. And I bet if I were to do a survey, hey, raise your hand if you feel like you're qualified to share the gospel. Many of us would feel unqualified. And we say things like this, well, what if they ask me a question to which I don't know the answer? Or what if they start to have a conversation with me about something in the scriptures that I don't feel comfortable defending? Or what if they take me to a place in the Bible that I've never read and I just don't feel qualified? I'm gonna step back. And we miss a moment, we miss an opportunity to share our faith because we don't feel qualified. A third reason, hey, you note takers, this one is gonna register with all of us. We don't want to come across as pushy, right? We don't wanna be that person. We don't wanna seem pushy. And I remember during those days of going door to door with my mom and my sisters that we heard a story about this evangelist who would come to your door, he would knock on it, and when you answered, he would pull out his lighter, grab your hand and burn your finger with his lighter and say, you don't want to spend eternity in hell, do you? And now, I don't know how effective that was, nor do I know if he stayed in jail or if he stayed free on the streets, I don't know. But we heard about that guy, and he was pushy. And none of us want to be pushy, and so we're like, I don't know if I don't want to share my faith. A fourth reason that we tend to hesitate sharing our faith, and this is sad, but it's true, is we tend to be complacent. We don't care that much, right? Like, my life is going fine. I love Jesus. Yes, I do. I love Jesus. I don't know about you, but I love Jesus, right? I don't really care that much. And I want to remind us at the outset of today's message about the gospel and sharing the gospel that you do not need a biblical degree from some Christian university to share your faith. You don't need to be an expert. You don't have to have all the answers, because the Bible tells me and it assures you that the same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead is living, active, and well inside of you. And apparently you didn't believe me because nobody's face is lit up. It's true that the same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead is available, living, active, alive inside of you. And God calls you his ambassador, the highest ranking diplomat sent from heaven to earth to represent Jesus Christ. So every single one of us who say, I'm a Jesus follower, I follow Jesus, God is calling you to share your faith. Now I'm gonna get in your business a little bit right here. It doesn't matter what you or I think about it, right? It doesn't. It doesn't matter if you and I are comfortable with it. It doesn't matter if you feel qualified. If you're a salesperson, some people are just natural talkers. I love listening to those people. I am not one of those people. But some of us are, and you don't have an excuse if you're not. If you are a child of God, you have the great commandment on your life, and you have a great commission on your life. The great commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength. And then Jesus added this emphasis that we should love our neighbor as ourselves. So you have a great commandment on your life that you should love God and you should love like God. That's really good. I should love like God loves. And as you read the scriptures, we quickly realize that the great commandment in your life is how do I say this word? Inextricably. Did I say that right? Inextricably connected to the Great Commission on your life. And when Jesus commanded his followers to go into all the world and to preach the gospel, it was out of his love for them and their love in return to him that they were called to go into all the world and preach the gospel. So today, I'm challenging us to just take God seriously, to just take him at his word, that if we love God, we will love people, and if we love people, we will tell people. There was a very popular atheist back in the early 2000s, like right around 2006, 2007. His name is, I don't remember his name, but he said this. He said how much, he was talking about this Christian who came up to him after a show, gave him a New Testament, and was witnessing to this. He's a comedian, and gave him a New Testament Bible. And he was talking about that experience. He said, I don't get mad when Christians try to proselytize. I don't get mad when Christians try to share their faith. Because think about it. He's like, how much do you have to hate me to not tell me? That was what he said. He's like, if there was a bus coming my way and you didn't try to warn me or try to get me out of the way, then, what kind of person are you? So we love people, right? And we love them enough to tell them the good news of who Jesus is and what he has done for them. So throughout this series, I've tried to be very clear that the gospel is so much more than that 3-page track, that someone reads. It's so much more than your 30-second memorized presentation or a 30-minute gospel presentation. I get that, but it does include it. And we don't get to just skip over that and act as though we as God's people aren't called to it. It's actually the starting point of many relationships with God. And it's the starting point into a gospel-filled life. So let's talk about 3 simple ways that every single one of us can share our faith with God, even if we're dealing with all 4 of those fears or all 4 of those realities, right? Let's talk about 3 simple ways to share our faith. And the first way that you and I can share our faith is to simply use what you have. Simply use what you have. And in fact, this is the very first way that we see the gospel spreading by a very unlikely candidate named Levi. Now, when I say Levi, you may not know much about him because you don't know his previous name. We know him as Matthew, but in the scriptures, initially his name is Levi. He's this despised tax collector, and Jesus radically changes Levi's life. And he simply couldn't go on without telling people about the love of Jesus in his life. And I want to point this out about Levi, that his example to us of using what you have to share the gospel, that he does this before he was ever a famous writer of the scriptures. He does this before he was ever a popular preacher. He did this before he had ever gone through any classes, on hermeneutics or any of those other big words around scriptures. He is simply excited about who Jesus is, and he wants to use what he has. So this makes us all super duper qualified because he never even led, in a city group or volunteered for Citylight Kids. The guy has nothing going for him except he knows how to throw a party. That's it. And I know a bunch of you, and I don't point anybody out, but a bunch of you are really good at throwing parties, and maybe there's good ways to say that too. A bunch of you are really good at hosting, events at your house, and there's nothing wrong with a good party. So he throws some steaks on the grills, he gets out the big screen TV, he sends out the invites, and he invites a band to his house. That's not true. That's kind of a modernized version of what he does. We'll read it here in Luke chapter 5. he sets the stage for his party. Luke chapter 5, verses 29 through 32, it says that then Levi held a great banquet for Jesus at his house. And so I got to translate, that's biblical language for a hopping party on the nice side of town with reserved parking. There's a large crowd. That's what the Bible says. There's a large crowd of tax collectors and then others who were eating with them. Now, it's really easy for us to just glance right past this text and miss out on some important details. So obviously, these are Levi's people. This crowd, these are his friends. These are the folks that know him. They're comfortable coming to Levi's parties. It says tax collectors and others. So there's a bunch of them. Levi goes all out. And then verse 30, we read that, but the Pharisees and the teachers of the law who belonged to their sect complained to Christ's disciples, why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners? So apparently this party is big enough that it attracts the attention of the elites in town. There's enough happening, the music is thumping, the volume is too loud, people are calling the cops, right? Somebody needs to go down there and shut things down, quiet it down, because it's big enough and loud enough that the religious leaders show up to check. Like, we just need to see what's going on here. And the first thing that they notice is that it's a bunch of sinners and tax collectors who are meeting with these godly people. And they ask Jesus' disciples, why would you do something like that? They ask Jesus' disciples. And then in verse 31, who answers them? Jesus answers them. He says, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, it's the sick. So Jesus is completely excited about, engaged in this party that Levi has thrown for his friends. He goes on to say, I have not come to call the righteous, I've come to call sinners to repentance. And I want us to recognize that Levi, soon to be Matthew, an amazing disciple of the faith, he simply got on the phone and called his buddies. He simply sent out a mass text and he pre-ordered fried chicken and he had everybody come over. He just used what he had. Every single one of us can use what we have to point people to Christ. We're going to start with what we have. So just ask yourself some questions. What are some of the things that I have? And I wrote down the first one here. Do you have a boat? Now, Adam and Michelle Brewer yesterday hosted this amazing party and with all these, and it was a fantastic, all these youth and different folks came out, and I wrote this, Adam, before you threw your party, but he had a boat. And so he's like, I can use a boat for God's kingdom. And he had some barbecue. I can use some barbecue for God's kingdom. He had 2 boats. 2 boats, that's right, and yes. And he used what he had. They both had boats. And we had an amazing time, but connecting and friendships and the beginning of something that's going to bloom into a beautiful ministry of youth in our community. So I just wanted to notice that we can use what we have. How about this? Do you have season tickets? We love the Gators around here. Some of you are shaking your heads no. Wow, be careful if you don't love the Gators. I've learned the hard way. Maybe you've got season tickets and you can share those, right? You can be a blessing to others, and you can begin some genuine relationships and friendships with people, and suddenly something as fun and, seemingly it's not related to ministry at all, becomes a ministry connection because you get to go to some baseball games or basketball games with people. How about this? Can you cook? Some of you cannot cook, and you shouldn't, right? But many of you can. And you can use the giftings that, if you just say, hey, there's free food here in a college town, your house will fill up, and what was just tacos turns into a point of talking about Jesus and getting to know people and love people well. How many of you have extra time? I talk to people all the time. I talked to a guy yesterday. I talked to some retirees this week. You've got time. Use what you have. You have time. Use what you have to serve. Some of us, you have no time, right? You have no time. What do you have, though? You have something. When I was a youth pastor at a church in Kentucky, we had this empty basketball facility that was not being used during the week. And my pastor challenged me. He's like, hey, Josh, why don't you start a basketball ministry? Just open it up and see who comes. And so I did. And on Tuesdays, from 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock for, 4 years, we would play basketball. And it started off with just 4 of us. And it grew to 60, and it grew to 80. And it was incredible, the connections that people made with the church just over a dumb game of throwing a ball through a hoop. It was something that I could do, and it was something that we had. You can use what you have. We lived in a neighborhood a couple of years ago, and there was a guy who was constantly inviting us over to his house. I'm an introvert. I don't like meeting new people, right? And I love meeting you new people, but in general, he would constantly invite us, and I would constantly not go. And then my family started going. They're like, it's so much fun. So I went, and all he did was take a slip and slide. He put it in his backyard. He started cooking up burgers, and the entire community over time found this to be an event that was worth doing, and connections were made and friendships were made. And then he started having movie nights in his front yard, and before long, you're making friendships with people. They're not Christians. They're on their way to an eternity away from Christ, and you become friends with them, and over relationship and over conversations, next thing you know, they're in your church. And next thing you know, a couple months later, they're getting baptized, and everything changes by simply using what you have. That's called relational evangelism. It's something that every single one of us can do, and it shouldn't be intimidating. It should be as natural as, what do I do? What do I have? A second way that we can reach people with the gospel is you can just invite someone to church. This seems like so on the nose, like so obvious, but just invite someone to church. John, one of Jesus's favorite disciples, so John says, told a powerful story about this woman who was filled with hurts in her life. But when she meets Jesus, he offers her living water, begins a relationship with her that transforms and changes her forever. And what's her first response? She invites everyone to church. Let me show you. In John chapter 4, verse 28, I'll read it. You can follow along. It says, then leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town, and she said to the people, hey, come and see. Just come and see. Come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah? They came out of town, and they made their way toward him. Come and see. Come and see. See, notice this, that she didn't memorize a script. She didn't print off her pastor's sermon and read it aloud. She didn't lead anyone in prayer. She simply invited someone to church. She just said, come and see. Just check it out. I don't know what it'll do for you. I just know what it's done for me. Come and see. And we have said this over and over again at CityLight. We believe that one invitation could change an eternity. Think about the power of that statement. One time that you get bold enough to simply say, why don't you come to church, could change an eternity. We host about every 6 weeks a class called Discover Citylight. And many of you have been through it. We meet right over here in the overflow. And I love to ask people, how did you hear about CityLight Church? You know, and just hear the responses. And so often I'll hear things like, I saw the sign. It opened up my eyes. I saw the sign. And they were just driving by. And that is very, very common, that it's a good-looking sign. What can I say? The other one is people often Google, hey, churches near me. And I can't tell you how many times people have said, well, I Googled churches near me, and I just started reading through the reviews, and I was like, okay, I'll check it out. And a lot of people do. But what gives my heart such joy is when I hear somebody say, you know what, I wasn't going to church. I had no desire to go to church, but Brad kept on annoyingly inviting me to church, right? You know, and Shayna just would not quit texting me every single Christmas. You know, why don't you just come out to church? And John, you know, and whoever, they just kept on inviting me. They were threatening me. They were offering me dinner. I don't know, maybe not the threatening part, but they did what it took to make it clear that I was welcome, that I would be loved, and that came to church. Now, listen to this. There are so many stories right around you, where you are sitting right now, of people who are here because someone invited them. People whose lives are completely changed, completely different, on a different trajectory because someone had the courage to respond in obedience to the Holy Spirit. Hey, just come and see. Come and see what God has done. An invitation could change an eternity. I want to be super practical about this because it is effective. We have an event that's coming up on August 17th. It's called the Back to School Carnival. And it is our biggest event by far. It's bigger than Christmas, it's bigger than Easter, and we put up a big circus tent out here, and we paint faces, and we grill hot dogs. We have cakewalks and door prizes, train rides, and all of it is free. It's simply a gift to our community, our way of saying we love you, and we give supplies for the kids going back to school. It is incredible, and it takes this entire church to make it happen. Wink, wink. So let's make sure that we make it happen again this year. But my point is that every time we do it, people who are far from God and disconnected from God have a testimony of, hey, I had no idea that there was even a church on this corner, and I saw a tent. I've driven by so many times, I just written it off, but I saw a tent, and somebody invited me. The Back to School Carnival is a beautiful, practical way where we can meet people and invite them to church. I have a friend who's here this morning who serves on one of our CityLight teams named Patrick, and Patrick used to be my dealer. He provided me with caffeine on a regular basis. We met at Starbucks. We met at Starbucks one day, and I was wearing my CityLight shirt, and he and his wife and their dogs were sitting there right outside, and we struck up a conversation. Come to find out, God was moving in his life, and we would get to see him rededicate his life and get baptized, and he's serving right now, holding his baby on that camera thing over there. We love you, Patrick, and we love your family, and we praise God for what he's doing. I know a lady in our church who every single time she goes out to eat, at the end, she writes a nice note on her receipt, and she gives a good tip. Don't do this if you're not gonna give a good tip, right? And she gives a good tip, and she says, I love Jesus, and I go to CityLight, would love to see you there someday. She gets it. An invitation could change an eternity. And believe me when I say you can do the same thing. You can. You can invite someone to church. You can muster up the courage to obey the Holy Spirit in your heart to invite someone to church. And you'll begin to change your mindset, and you'll start to see people differently when you look around you and you recognize they need God's grace. They need what only Jesus can do. And for whatever reason, Jesus has decided to use his church to administer his grace. You are a conduit of his grace. And so that you're gonna find somebody at the gym who is just disconnected, and maybe they're going through a season of depression, and God is going to send you their way so that you can invite them to church. You're gonna meet someone at work who's new to the city, and they just feel like, man, I made a big mistake coming to Gainesville, and you're just supposed to connect them to God and his church, and it doesn't have to be complicated. In fact, it shouldn't be. It should be as natural as, this is who I am, this is who I love. I would love to invite you to church. So I want to just encourage us to not think of sharing our faith as this thing that just the elites do, just the pastors and the lay, I don't know, it's all of us are meant to do this. So we can all use what we have, and we can all invite. And then thirdly, is you can share your story. You can share your story. Your story is a powerful story of how Christ has changed your life. It is more powerful than you know. It's more powerful than you think. In fact, it is terrifying to your spiritual enemy. Do you recognize that your testimony, your story, puts a sock in the devil's mouth? That he's constantly accusing and lying about the church, but as soon as you tell your story, he's like, woo, woo, woo. Yeah, I can't talk anymore. And you don't believe me, but it's true. There's a story in the scriptures. There's two. First, There's one in Revelation. Revelation chapter 12, verse 10. It says this, that I heard a loud voice shouting across the heavens, "It has come at last, salvation and power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ. For the accuser," there's Satan, "of our brothers and sisters," that's the church, "has been thrown down to earth. And the one who accuses them before God day and night. And they," what does it say? "They have defeated him," how? "By the blood of the Lamb," and then watch this, "by their testimony." Their testimony. Your story of what God has done in your life. It's more powerful than you understand. One time in John chapter 9, Jesus heals a blind man, and all the skeptics are there, and they get mad, and they're criticizing Jesus, and they're calling Jesus a con, right? They're calling him a sinner. But then this healed man tells his story. In verse 25, he replied, he's like, "Whether Jesus is a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see." And the man just simply told his story. And so the skeptics, they push back, and they refuse to really hear what the blind man is saying. And so in verse 26, they asked him, "What did Jesus do to you? How did he open your eyes?" And he answered, "I've told you already, but you didn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Maybe you want to become his disciples too." And I just love this. You want me to tell you my story again? Like, I'll tell you again. If you want to become his disciple, we can make that happen right here, right now. He simply told his story. That is how the gospel works. When you tell your story of God's glory. I heard one person describe it this way. It's just one beggar telling another beggar where they can find bread. And I love that image. In fact, I wanted to just take a moment and share some of my own salvation story. Again, many of you have heard this, but my family, when I was very young, we were on the highway to hell. And there was 6 of us, and I was probably 7 or 8 years old, so a very young family. And we were going in the wrong direction when it comes to love. Our family was breaking up, and poverty and all kinds of just awful things were happening. But my great aunt, a widow and a prayer warrior, started praying for our family. And she prayed religiously and told us, "So I'm praying for you, I'm praying for you." And then she got really bold, and she started inviting us to church. And she would invite us over and over and over and over again. And my dad had the same excuse all the time. "I can't go because I don't have a suit. I don't have a suit. I don't have a suit." And if you were around in the 80s, you know that was kind of the expectation when you went to church. Men wore suits. And so my great aunt, who was also a widow, was also very poor. She saved up her money and went out and bought my dad a suit, a tie, a shirt, and shoes. Came on a Saturday afternoon, held them up at the door, and said, "Will you go to church now?" We went to church that week, and I have been in church the rest of my life. I gave my life to Christ at that church. I got baptized there, and I received a calling into ministry that I didn't even recognize that's what it was. But I was all because my great aunt had the courage to invite someone to church, and then she went out of her way, took it upon herself to stand in the gap between eternity and my family. It's amazing how powerful how it is that God uses people to share the gospel. God wants to do what only he can do through you. This week, there's a bunch of CityLighters that have signed up. I think there's about 30 of you who have signed up to join Pastor Mark Bain and the Real Life Church heading down into Southeast Gainesville with Convoy for Hope. And we're going to give out supplies and food to folks in our city who could really use them. Listen to this. You can count on it. You can count on it that God is going to give you the opportunity to be a gospel conduit, to be a gospel light, to be his love on earth. You can count on it. And I want to encourage you, don't shy away. Don't allow Satan to snuff out your flame. Be bold in your obedience. Be bold in your storytelling. I know that I was talking to Pastor Mark, and he plans to even present the gospel at every site where we're going to be. I think there's going to be 3 or 4 sites. He's going to present the gospel at all 4 sites. So you better believe that if the gospel is presented, people are going to respond. So we're going to have the opportunity to pray with people, to invite people to church, and to share our story of what Jesus has done in our life. In 2 weeks, and it's amazing how God is orchestrating things in the life of our church. In 2 weeks, we are coming back to At the Movies. You heard Darcy talk about it. And At the Movies there's no better time to invite someone to church than at the movies. People who would not otherwise come will come because it's a movie. And what are we doing? We are using, Jesus would speak in parables. Parables were simply earthly stories with a heavenly meaning. We are using Hollywood as our parables to tell stories about God's goodness and his faithfulness. And just moments ago, I asked, do you know someone who is not a Christian? Do you know someone who could benefit from the grace of God in their life? And almost all of us raised our hand. Those of us who didn't probably would have, if could have, right? It would be tempting to say, hey, Josh is saying invite people. It'd be tempting to say, well, I know like 50 people who don't know Christ. How am I supposed to invite all of them? Don't get overwhelmed. Pick one. Pick one. Who's one person you can be praying for, you can be investing in and inviting to church? There's one person out there, and allow God to break your heart for that one person and invite them to church. And if it's not at the movies, which honestly it should be, it'll be sometime down the road. Allow God's Spirit and his grace to work in someone's life. What an amazing opportunity. Do you recognize that when you have the opportunity to invite someone, and maybe you feel like the heart, God's speaking into your heart, he's just entrusted you with his amazing grace for their life. If you sense, hey, maybe I should say something, maybe I should invite something, that was a deposit of God's trust into your life. Hey, I trust you right now at this moment to be my conduit. So imagine if all of us just found one. Now, we don't need to be leading 50. Maybe that day will come for you. But maybe if we all just invited one person to church, imagine how God might bless them, how he might change this world. And I said it before, it's worth saying again. You're sitting next to someone who was someone's one. Someone was praying for the person next to you. Someone invited that person next to you, and everything changed when they met Jesus. That's the positive side. The negative side is that your spiritual enemy wants for nothing more than the people in your circles to not hear about Christ from you. Your spiritual enemy wants for nothing more than you to respond in fear, to give up or say, that's not me, I can't do these things, I'm not a preacher or whatever. There is a war going on between life and death, and it's easy for us to get mixed up in life and not see the realities of it, but it is happening, and we get to play a central part in it. That's what Jesus decided. For reasons only God knows, he has entrusted you as his church with the most important message of all time, the gospel. And we've been talking about it for 4 weeks now, the gospel by all possible means. That is Christ's answer for this broken world. And for whatever reason, he decided to use his church, you and I, broken people healed by his grace, to be a light into this world. It's no mistake that that family moved in next to you. It's no mistake that that person got added to your work schedule. It's no mistake that that kid got added to your class and that that family met you at camp. Those are not mistakes. Those are ordained moments, cross intersections where the Holy Spirit is designing a moment for you to represent Christ to them. They were supposed to meet Jesus through you. It's a holy intersection. Let's use what we have. Let's invite people to church and let's share our story. Now, it's tempting to hear a message like this and feel guilt-tripped. And I want to avoid that at all costs. I want us to be a church that out of our love for the world, that out of our love we invite, out of our love we share, out of our love we tell. It doesn't work if you come across like, man, my pastor told me to do this, you know? It just doesn't work that way. It has to be coming from a place of genuine love. And so today, if you've sensed yourself just pushing back the whole time, like that, no. I want to just encourage you to pray, to ask God to change your heart, to ask God to soften your heart for a love for the world. It's not a have to, it is a get to.